What is up, everybody? I'm here once again. My good friend Mike Fisher from Codify, and we're here to come up with our list of the top 9 starting pitchers of all time, or at least a modern era. Like we'll cut it off. We're not doing all time because like Walter Johnson's going to win, and no one really saw him pitch. Less fun. Also played pre-integration, all that stuff. So figure a cutoff of 9. I know MLB Network, who were basically doing 9 because of that, started at 1947. It's going to be loosely around that because I think the
Let's do
leagues,
that.
yeah, the leagues didn't fully get integrated until 1950, late 1950s at least. So it's harder to put some of the other guys in context. But for those who don't know, MLB Network just recently published their prime 9 pitchers, and here's that list. And this is our list because we kind of differ with it. We've also been running some stuff on X, just getting random fan opinions on it. But without further ado, Mr. Fisher, let's start off with your number 9 pitcher of all time, or since 19 whatever.
I'll preface this by saying that when you suggested we do this a week ago, it sounded like a lot of fun, and it's created just an enormous amount of anguish in my life in the last couple of days. I've changed this list numerous times.
I did too.
It's not an objective thing, which we all like to do when we make these lists. It's like, do you look at how good they were at their best, for a year, for 3 years, for 5 years, for their career? Do you penalize guys for shitty postseasons? What? And we just chose to kind of leave it out there and just like, yes, all of that.
You make a really good point because some of this, like you can go based on WAR, or you can go based on ERA plus, or you can go based on a whole bunch of things. But sometimes that penalizes guys that had shorter media, like, shooting star careers. And how much do you penalize that? How much do you penalize guys that had a long career? How much do you penalize guys that didn't perform well in the playoffs? It's really tough.
Right.
I don't think there's any one answer. So, and honestly, if y'all out there, please feel free to chime in the comments. We'll look at them, and I'm sure your list will differ.
Yes, I don't know your list. You don't know mine. But we both know that the guys that aren't on our list that just missed the cut are wild talents, just all time great. They're just didn't make it. My number 9 is Sanford Koufax.
Nice pick.
And that was a struggle because, depending on how you're going about this, if you want to talk about, how good was the guy at his peak, but he's way up the list, do you penalize him for, the fact that he pitched his last game when he was 30? Kind of. I mean, I'd like to fill it in. We all would have liked to fill it in, but that's not what happened. So, it pains me to have a guy that low, but a guy like Koufax that low, but that's where I have him. That's where he last settled on my list, number 9.
My number 9 is also a Dodger, but is not Sandy Koufax. My number 9 is going to be Clayton Kershaw, who could definitely be higher. Like, I feel bad putting him at number 9. He has the lowest ERA out of anybody on this list. Clearly one of the best pitchers of the modern era. Eye test tells you that, stats tell you that. Where I struggled is his legacy while being a great regular season pitcher. The postseason stuff, I think it just lingers in fans' minds. Like he's just doesn't, he's great, but he doesn't have that legend about him a little bit where to me, I do have Koufax higher because of the legend of Sandy Koufax. But I could go either way. I can definitely make the argument he should be higher. Because he's no doubt great. And if you're going based on ERA, he could be number 1. So, but I have him number 9.
Kershaw is my number 8. Kershaw and Koufax flip-flopped on my list numerous times. It's crazy how good Kershaw has been. We tend to discount it like, oh, he pitches in Dodger Stadium for the Dodgers. Of course it's great. Like, and oh, he sucks now. He's continued on his career. Like, he sucks? The last 2 years, he's had a 177 ERA plus in both seasons. Now I totally get some train wrecks in the post. I get it. But to me, that doesn't wipe out. To me, it doesn't wipe out what he's done in the regular season. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to hear feedback from folks out there because I don't know if we're discounting Kershaw too much or giving him too much credit. Like it could be either way. I think it's hard to argue with his stats though, and he just the way he composes himself on the mound. He is a true pitcher, and I'm a huge fan. Both of these guys, I mean, both Koufax and Kershaw have just beautiful curveballs, great stuff.
Right.
Hard to argue against them.
Start to look at the fundamental thing here of preventing runs and how it, even in this era, like guys are throwing 5 or 6 innings and that's it. But if you look at how many innings he's pitched and how many runs he's prevented versus an average pitcher, weighing it by how long he's pitched, it's like, this is a top 5. I mean, we're drawing the line in the 50s. This is a top 5 guy for a career in terms of preventing just raw runs prevented. So he's a tough one. He's a tough one.
He is definitely a tough one. I struggled with that too.
Who's your number 8?
My number 8 is a guy that a lot of people could put number 1 in their legend mind, but I'm going with Nolan Ryan at number 8. And I'll tell you why. Number 1, he's without a doubt a legend. There's a legend built around the guy that, number 1, it has to vault him around above Kershaw just because of the legend aspect of it. The number of no-hitters, ridiculous. The number of strikeouts, ridiculous. How hard he threw for his time period. Now, I put out a video. I don't think he threw 108 miles an hour. That's silly talk. They didn't even know where that laser was aimed. It was all an experimental test. All that, I took it. You can look at that video. I discount that, but he threw hard, and he probably threw over 100 miles an hour at his peak. So I'm not saying he didn't throw hard. I'm saying the 108 number is probably fanciful. But as far as a legendary pitcher, everybody knows him. There's a built-in story. Nothing would surprise you about Nolan Ryan. It's just the pitching part is what got me. Like if I'm looking at a pitcher, I expect him not to lead the whole world in walks, which he is also the all-time walk leader in addition to the all-time strikeout leader. ERA plus wasn't tremendously ridiculous. He had 2 ERA titles, no Cy Young Award, which means that his contemporaries did not view him ever as the best pitcher in the league, which takes him down a notch as far as if I'm judging a pitcher. But, lifetime ERA of 3.19, definitely solid, pitched during lower ERA times, and 324 wins. I don't discount wins like a lot of people do. I discount them like as the pure judge of a pitcher, but it means he pitched for a long time, racked up wins on bad teams, for a lot of bad teams. I had a hard time with it. He could be higher. He could be off your list too, because there are pitchers that would say he is not a pitcher. He's a thrower and just overpowered people. But the legend of Nolan Ryan just does it for me. He's got to be on the list, and I could have had him higher, but that's where I got him.
So I'm hearing you could have had him higher or lower.
I definitely could have.
Where the hell do I put him? How do you put Nolan Ryan number 8?
I know that's
right. I have him number 7. And my thinking is similar. You sit there and go, I mean, legend is fine and legend is important, but like the point is, if you just look at the number of times the guy went out there and just was unhittable, unscorable against, like flat out, like he had the most raw number of just kick-ass high game score games. When you step back and you start looking at a season and 5 seasons and a career, and you say, I need my pitcher. I don't care if he walks guys if they're not scoring. If Blake Snell wants to walk a bunch of guys and they don't score, fine. But they were scoring. And this was in a lower run scoring environment. And he doesn't look good. I mean, what is a 112 career ERA plus? It's like, it's hard to really wind up and say that's the best pitcher. So, proverbial gun to the head, I might even have him off, but the way I approached this was not just career and runs, but just like at their peak, and not just a season, but even finer of like when he went out there, like he's got it today. You guys are screwed. You're not scoring. And he did it many times, most no hitters, most low hit games, most, just lights out games of anyone ever. So he's got to be on the list. I put him 7. He was a tough one to sit there and look at Kershaw and Koufax and go,
yeah, and
those guys were tough.
I think Nolan Ryan grew up idolizing Koufax, and I don't know if Nolan
Right.
Ryan himself would feel like he approached Koufax's
Not
meteoric
through 30.
greatness. Right. And then, right, great point. Like, I think
Right.
Nolan Ryan dialed it in and became more of a pitcher when he had his changeup and he knew how good his curveball was and mixed things up a little bit more. He became the Nolan Ryan that was more of a pitcher versus a thrower, but still an absolute legend. And he could be, if you all disagree, that's totally fine. He has a movie and a documentary made after him. He deserves it. An all-time great, no doubt. And again, this is our opinion. I'm sticking to mine. You're sticking to yours.
Yeah, I mean, he's somewhere there. He floated around too. He it just felt like he should be on the list versus the guys that I kept barely off the list. So
Absolutely.
for that reason.
Yep. My number 7 is Bob Gibson, and he will throw at me maybe for having him that low. But it actually isn't that low because MLB Network had him nowhere to be found on their list. And to me, Bob Gibson's only ERA title was his legendary 1968 season. That cuts both ways. I heard a lot of people saying, well, they changed the rules because of him. They lowered the mound because of Bob Gibson. Well, I get it. But that year, 7 pitchers had below a 2 ERA. So it wasn't just Bob Gibson. It was a lot of pitchers that were benefiting from the pitcher-friendly mound. And the overall league ERA was under 3 that year. You compare it to, and we'll touch, I'm sure, on Pedro later on, but Pedro had a year where the nearest guy to him had a 3.7 ERA. The nearest guy in the entire league had a 3.7 ERA, and he had a 1.7. For Gibson, he was ahead of his peers, but it wasn't monstrously. He's still a great pitcher,
Well,
obviously. And, Cy Young's, everything. But again, cutting it the other way, you can say they lowered the mound because of Gibson, but all these other pitchers we're talking about had the bulk of their careers on a lower mound. And you would say maybe that he had the advantage of being on a higher mound, which helped him that year with a lower ERA, and he never approached an ERA title again after that. So you can look at it 2 different ways. Either he took advantage of a very pitcher friendly environment, or they changed rules because of him.
he certainly took advantage of it, but that was the environment, and
Oh,
you can
totally.
certainly compare it. You can certainly compare him to the other pitchers that were pitching in that era.
Yeah, without a doubt. Great
I
pitcher.
don't throw as big of a bucket of water on that season. Was it 258 ERA plus for 300 and whatever innings he pitched? I mean, it was
Not
insane. It was insane. But I mean, I don't want to spoil like you're comparing to other guys.
No, a legendary competitor too.
Yeah.
Like I view this as important. Again, if we're going to ding pitchers for not pitching well in the postseason, Gibson had one of the all-time great World Series games. Give him credit for everybody would say he's one of the best competitors ever to pitch.
Right. What was the stat? I wish I had it up. It was like no pitchers had a dozen shutouts in a season except for Bob Gibson, who had 12 in an 18 start span of that season. Like, what is happening? No wonder they lowered the mound. And sometimes I'm like, dude, they didn't lower the mound because of one guy. And then you go back and look at the stats. You're like, I don't know. They might have.
He's basically Jake Arrieta.
He broke it.
He's basically Jake Arrieta.
Right. And there's a guy who, we could talk about it. Like, why isn't he on this list? Like, because the rest
of his career wasn't really anywhere near. Yeah. Good point.
Right. But Gibson is my number 6.
We seem to be like one off here.
He belongs there. He belongs on this list for sure. And to not be, he wasn't on the MLB one. What do you? I don't know what you're looking at there. I assume it was just an accident or something because he definitely belongs. There's no doubt that he was ahead of the other guys for me.
I totally didn't understand why I didn't put him on there. He's an important pitcher in baseball history, and he's one of the all-time greats.
Postseason good, great at the peak, great at the good career. I mean, I don't know what you're throwing a rock at with him. I have no idea.
Great fielder too. Like he had everything.
9 Gold Gloves.
Right. Like what do you want from the dude? My number 6 is Sandy Koufax. And again, we talked about his peak. A guy with 5 consecutive ERA titles at his peak, as good as pretty much anybody that's ever pitched in baseball, a competitor too. Big game pitcher, was viewed as a god among men by the folks that competed against him. really put strikeouts in vogue. 3 Cy Youngs, like he doesn't need any introduction. I do think his career was short, which may lead some to put Gibson ahead of him, which would not anger me at all. Like I can make an argument for either one. I just view him as consistently being at a peak for a little bit longer than Gibson, and his peak was insane.
Yeah.
So that's why I have him there.
I understand why you do. I'll stick to. But do we have the same bottom 4 on our list? Just
We
in
might.
different order?
I think so.
Gibson, Ryan, Kershaw, Koufax.
I have a feeling we're going to have the same top 5 and maybe in a different order too. I don't know.
Well, if we have a different top 5 after having the same bottom 4, we got a problem.
Yeah. Unless you like snuck in like Justin Verlander or Fergie
Sid
Jenkins.
Finch.
Roy Halladay. Roy Halladay deserves some consideration, right? A little bit, maybe.
Right.
You could have.
My number 5, and it with a little bit of anguish, is George Thomas Seaver, who is so underrated. It's sick. He checked all the boxes on this too. I mean, he had tons and tons of great games. His career was long and prosperous. It pains me. It pains me, and it should be seen as a testament of how good I think that the guys that I have ahead of him are, because I don't have anything bad to say about him. Seaver was amazing, and I'm sorry, when we run our polls, we can see that he is sadly underrated. Like, dude, I said Tom Seaver.
Nobody apparently knows who Tom Seaver is.
No, he was just born a little too early. So
it's very frustrating to me, which is probably why I bumped him ahead of my number 5, which is Roger Clemens. A couple of reasons why I bumped him ahead of Roger Clemens. Number one, if you look at pure stats, you can make the argument Roger Clemens is number 1. 7 Cy Youngs, ridiculous talent. What do you have? 5 strikeout titles, 7 Cy Youngs, 7 ERA titles. Like,
dude, he didn't have 7 Cy Youngs. That's ridiculous. How could you have 7?
He just stole them. Like he was just
You'd be in the Hall of Fame then, right?
No, you wouldn't be. And this is the part. This is the part that I struggle with. Is there is a little bit of a shadow on his career, and I hate it because watching him, he was another real big competitor. Obviously, you don't get where he is without that. Great pitcher. Again, if you want to ignore all the hullabaloo outside stuff, the shadows, easily top 4 then. Like, I think I'd be stupid not to put him there. I just couldn't put him above Tom Seaver, who is the ultimate pitching machine back then. Like, just the way he looked at pitching as a craft was far and away was revolutionary for pitchers. Like, I think Seaver revolutionized pitching almost as much as anybody, even bringing in weight training and stuff before Nolan Ryan did. So I am going with Roger Clemens at number 5. It hurts me because I know he's better than that. If you look at his stats and your eye test and watching a guy pitch, I just couldn't I just couldn't get beyond the shadow and just sit there and go, yeah, he's definitely ahead of guys who we obviously know didn't have that shadow. But who knows? Like, I don't know what happened. So I'm just going based on what I think.
You know how many drug tests he failed?
Yeah, right.
Oh, wait, that was 0.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he wasn't convicted by a court when they had this. Like, so do you penalize a guy for reputation? It's so hard.
Well, and if you do, how much what are you wiping out in his career? You're just going to knock him down one notch, or you take him off the list? It's a Barry Bonds thing where it's like, dude, this guy was already a Hall of Famer.
It's different a little bit from Bonds.
A little bit.
Bonds, right. Because I think Bonds never had that little. So to me, I saw a little trailing off in Clemens' career, and then he came back.
True.
Where Bonds really didn't trail off. He just saw other people getting all this attention and said, well, I can supercharge my career. I could be freaking ridiculous if I start doing this. Allegedly. I don't know that. We don't know. Like, using my brain, I pretty much
Wait,
know.
what? Are you talking about Bonds or Clemens?
Yeah, I'm talking about Bonds. Like, who knows about, like, again, this is just a list. If I am not going to say that Roger Clemens is not an all-time great pitcher, because he is an all-time great pitcher. I just am holding that a little bit in my rankings.
My number 4 is William Roger Clemens.
So yeah, you probably held it a little bit in there too.
And those Clemens and Seaver flip flopped on my list as well. Seaver better in some ways. Clemens just that. I mean, are you going to discount it or not? Even if you discount a little, the career value Clemens had is ridiculous.
Yeah, I got you. And I have Seaver in my top 4. I remember we did a Mount Rushmore discussion. I
Mm-hmm.
had Seaver on my Mount Rushmore then. I have a hard time just looking at his career and not thinking he was one of the ultimate
Yeah,
pitching machines. Everybody looked up to him. What did he have? Like, was it 9 consecutive 200 strikeout years? Brought the
yeah,
strikeouts in vogue, like consistently good. And I also have him here because I wanted to make a statement that I don't think he gets enough attention as one of the all-time great pitchers. Although
very true.
MLB had him number 2. So that shows you I don't think I'm maybe overrating him at all. I 2 may be a little high for me. Not 2 in the history of the like maybe influential pitchers, maybe, but I think 2's high.
Their list was pretty funky. I'll just
Yeah, I
leave it at
thought so.
that.
I thought so too.
And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, so they didn't put it in order or something. I'm like, no, they did. No, they did though. Like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
don't know what the argument is there, but okay. I mean, I won't hate any accolades that you throw at Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver's like kind of the guy that you would have drawn up back there. Like, let's just make up a fun pitcher. It'll just be fake, but look, let's just make him awesome. We'll call him Tom Terrific. Hell, we'll give him these pitches and we'll put him on this team and he'll get drafted. He'll go to school here and get drafted here. Just a great guy. Great pitcher.
You know, the funny thing about him, and I think he gets penalized, he doesn't have that legend about him like Nolan Ryan does. Nolan Ryan looked up to Tom Seaver and was mentored by
Mm-hmm.
Tom Seaver. He does
Mm-hmm.
not think he was the pitcher that Tom Seaver was. Um,
It
I
wasn't.
think the issue is he didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous 300 something strikeout years or the
Right.
no hitters, one no hitter. One, right? I think he had one, just one on the Reds, I believe, because the Mets didn't have a no hitter till way later. So I think he's missing that legend piece. He was just legendary. He just did, but he didn't have that Bob Gibson year or the Sandy Koufax
Right.
left hand of God thing. I mean, he's just Tom Terrific.
Right. You saw the tweet today. I think you bumped it, the most 75 plus game scores, but who the hell knew that back then? You just see him
No.
go out there and pitch 8 innings and give up, 2 runs and 3 hits and a pair of walks and strike out 9 guys. Like, hey, that's a good game. Whatever. It's Tom Seaver. Let's just move on. You're right. It didn't have that flash of holy crap. He struck out 14 or it was a 1 hitter or a no hitter. He didn't have the flash for sure.
Yeah.
That's part of what made him great.
I agree. I mean, do
Mm-hmm.
we have to reward steady greatness at some point, and he's it.
Yep. My number 3 after enormous amount of soul searching is Gregory Allen Maddux. It's another guy I'm not going to throw rock. I mean, if you're going to you can say like at its very best, like his best lines for a game, it's like, okay, well that's okay. It's not, you didn't strike out 15 guys or he didn't have that flash too. What is it? 18 gold gloves and just like
It just
like
sounds
you
stupid.
walked how many guys this year? I will never forget that pair of years, 94, 95, with just what was 260 something ERA plus combined for the 2 years. Like, what is happening? This guy broke it, So again, he checks most of the boxes. When I hold him up against the 2 guys we apparently have above him, I don't know if you have Maddux third, but you'll tell me in a minute. But that's why it's just that little bit of holdback of just not quite that bit. But it's funny because like when you talk about a pitcher, like I mean, so
There
many
isn't
times I
any
think of him
better one.
first.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So it's like it's funny. Like you could almost say number 1. So
I
did not.
totally agree with you, and I have him at number 3 as well for a lot of the same reasons you did. Although he
Mm-hmm.
may be my favorite at his peak, since I watched so many of his games.
Yeah.
If you told me there was a better pitcher than him at his peak, it would be hard for me to imagine. Although you can make an argument for the 2 guys ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
4 ERA titles, 355 wins, 316 lifetime ERA. What is it? I have 9 walks per 9 titles. So he had just amazing command and 4 Cy Young. So he's considered by his peers as an
Mm-hmm.
absolute stud. It is
It was.
like, right. He just was like, he's Greg Maddux. So being in the top three with the other with the other two that we apparently have, it's certainly
Well,
and you can switch it. Like, I don't really, you can say he is the best pure pitcher of all time, and it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all.
it's interesting. You said something to me the other day, one of our other talks that surprised me. I guess I didn't realize or remember it, that they tended to pick Smoltz over Maddux in the big games, that
Yes.
prefer him. Should we take that more as a testament to Smoltz or a little bit of a slight on Maddux?
I think it's more of a testament. Like, Smoltz was the most clutch. His stuff was just ridiculous. I mean, even Chipper
Mm-hmm.
talked about it when they did their whole the Braves had their guys from the championship teams come by and talk, and Chipper was like, we all knew that Smoltz had, it's great during the regular season, during the postseason, you need that stuff to beat people, and
Mm-hmm.
Smoltz was that guy and always locked in. There is a little bit of that. Like, Maddox's postseason career didn't have a amazing defining moment there, where I'd say Smoltz did. We were talking about the Jack Morris stuff, and he
Mm-hmm.
legendarily faced off against him and matched him pitch for pitch. And that game may have just put Morris in the Hall of Fame just by itself. And
It
you had
did. It
Smoltz,
did.
yeah, and you had Smoltz pitch for pitch with him early
Right.
in Smoltz's career. So,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, again, Maddux, 100% great pitcher. If you have him higher than this, I don't blame you. That's fine. But I also think the top two guys are ridiculous as well.
Yes. And top two guys, I don't know if you're going to say or pretend that you didn't flip flop at all.
I did flip flop.
All right, you're a good man for being honest.
Yeah.
I flip flopped on this as well, but my number two is, and no disrespect in any way, is Randall David Johnson, the big
I've heard of
unit.
him.
Yes, he was on top for a while of my list. I'm going to stick him there because I cannot get past that 7-year period that Pedro had last year at the Expos, 6 years with Boston, just obscene. Middle of the steroid era. You're pitching in Fenway Park for 6 of those 7 years, just obscene. He didn't have quite as many of those flashy games that Randy had, and I don't want to say anything bad about Randy at all.
Perfect game,
But
20 strikeouts, just
right.
fear into
And,
the heart of batters. Yeah.
right. And that's what's great about all this. Your tweet where you overlaid both of them, it's just like, I called my daughter and I said, check this out. I know who these guys are, but like, think about this. These are the two best pitchers for the last, whatever, 70 years or whatever we're talking about. And they're nothing alike. This guy's letting go at 5 feet. He's this little guy. He throws like this. He throws changeups. This guy's like making you piss yourself, throwing these nasty sliders and 100-mile-an-hour fastballs from slinging it from first base. They're nothing alike, and they're 1-2. And they're not normal guys. They're outlier guys. And like this is what I just love about pitching in general.
It's the beauty of pitching, because like if you look at our top three, you have a guy that didn't throw tremendously hard. I asked Maddux how hard he threw at the peak of his career. He said 94 maybe, but he didn't,
Mm-hmm.
he obviously didn't come close to sitting there during most of his career and was just a
Right.
craftsman. I agree with you. I have the big unit number two. Don't kill me, Randy. You could be number one. You were number one on MLB Network's list. I did not disagree with them having him number one. You could do that. 4 ERA titles, 9
Mm-hmm.
strikeout titles, 5 Cy Youngs, fearsome, again, a 20 strikeout game, monster seasons with a ton of strikeouts, a perfect game, everything you could ever want, and a legend. Like, he has that aura about him. Like we mentioned with Nolan Ryan, there's the Randy Johnson aura where, Larry Walker and John Kruk were pooping themselves at the plate. So just so much legend around the guy. If you have him number one, does not offend me at all.
You're not wrong.
You're not
Yeah.
wrong. Right.
I mean, yeah.
We're just more right because we both
Correct.
apparently have the same number one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let you start on Pedro and I'll finish.
Dude.
How cool is it that we
get
to talk about Pedro Martinez? Like, I just want to talk about him.
That 7-year period, a 2.13 ERA plus for that 7 years. Any pitcher that did that for a year would be in the discussion, like, for 7 years. And I think he's underrated, and it sounds crazy. He's not, obviously, to us, but he pit because of where he pitched and because of when he pitched. Like, okay, I mean, there's still obscene stats, and then he lapped the field. You showed that in your tweet, like just lap the field. Like that's wrong. You have a typo in your tweet. There's no way anybody did that, but you didn't. But what in a normal era, it's like, okay, now we're having statues and awards after him because now he has a low 1 ERA or whatever. It's just crazy. Just wild. And you like you said, we both don't discount one loss record. Like the guy didn't lose.
I,
I mean,
I,
my God.
I don't know where you find the only flaw you can find is his career wasn't as long as some of these other guys. His peak
Yeah,
was still pretty darn long. Like he was still dominant,
right.
has the flashy stuff. Like he does have the legend about him. He has perhaps arguably the greatest changeup of all time. I could argue some other guys maybe, but he's among the best changeups, if not the best, probably the best changeup of any starting pitcher of all time, without a doubt.
The, right. The worst thing I could say when I was trying to discount him was just to take those 7 years out and look what's left. And when you look at what's left, you're like, mid threes. It's not great. And like you said, he didn't hang around forever. It's not that great, but my God, the 7 years are too good. It's just too good.
Well, when you have what was our number, arguably one of our top pitchers of all time was against
Mm-hmm.
him one of those seasons where he came in second in the ERA title race at 3.7 and Pedro had
Yeah.
a what, 1.7? You
Yeah.
double Pedro's ERA and it still would have won the ERA title. And nobody
Right.
you can't say that about anybody.
No.
Like
No.
that's just ridiculous when you see the environment he pitched in and pitching that well. Ridiculous. So he's a pitcher because he had ridiculous command. He even said he could hit a gnat's ass with his fastball.
Mm-hmm.
He at one point had the three best pitches in the major leagues. His peers voted him having the best fastball, the best curveball, and the best changeup in the entire league. So I don't know what you said. Like and had perhaps no, he had the best all-star performance of any pitcher. Apologies to Mr. Hubble. Um, it's ridiculous.
It's silly to say that we have captured and identified, the point in time where a pitcher was at his absolute peak and the best ever of anyone, but it just might be the 99 All-Star game. It just might be. I mean, it was smack in the middle of his peak, which is, I mean, to me, just like the best, no doubt, over any like 5, 6, 7 year period, like the best. Like best. Maybe you want to go back and scrape somebody, Silver King from 1880, whatever, or something like that, where they used one baseball the whole game. Forget all that stuff. Anybody playing anything resembling modern baseball, it's the best ever. And he's at the top of our list.
Yeah, and I mean, pitching it, rocking these
Yeah.
steroid juiced dudes, making he had the old lean back on Sammy Sosa,
Mm-hmm.
made him look like he never saw a curveball before. And he came in that game because Ted Williams did it was a Ted Williams All-Star game
Mm-hmm.
in Boston, and Pedro wanted to put on a show, and holy shit, did he put on a show?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just obscene.
He was one of the guys. I remember when Pitch FX came out. It was 2007. I think they had some games. 2008 for the season or whatever it was. But one of the guys that was really interesting to me of like, we know this guy's short and he's kind of flinging it kind of sidearmy out there stuff. How low is this thing? And yeah, it was like 5 feet off the ground. And they're like, yeah, but the ball got there 4 feet off the ground or 3.5 or over here. So like, I mean, the apparent angle, which is not something that was in the vernacular back then, but just like you could tell, like there's something different about this. This isn't the normal guy. And maybe that's part of why, it really got me thinking personally of how, wow, the things we know when we watch that you didn't really think in the 90s. You're like, who's pitching today? And, you might be like, hey, he throws fast or he throws different. But you started to appreciate we only have a little bit of information of like what was different about Pedro.
And he may have been even better in today's environment, knowing why his
Mm-hmm.
pitches played the way they did, which is stupid to even say.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of philosophies back then about keeping the ball down, and you didn't want to. And with his arm slot, he may have been, DeGrom copied him, so that tells you enough. Like Jacob DeGrom, who didn't make our list,
didn't make our list.
No, but if you had a Jacob DeGrom's best year for a number of years, he, without a doubt, Jacob DeGrom pitch for pitch is the best pitcher in the last however many years. Without, I don't think you can argue. He just hasn't had that many of those pitches, but he mirrored himself after Pedro. And that just shows you what it could have done maybe in modern times, even modern times. He pitched in modern times. He pitched in the worst times for pitchers, period, and did what he did. So both of us, again, Pedro, you can pick up your crown. I'll hand it to you when you come over and throw in my basement over here. Yeah, well,
come chat.
That creepy. Who just missed your list? Like if you were looking at number 10. Right. Cool.
Just off it. I don't have the whole thing, but I have a couple guys definitely.
Yeah, just a couple.
I mean, I stared at Gaylord Perry. Just stared. And we remember older guy spitting all over the ball and everything. Yeah. But when you take a really good look at what he did, it's like, oh my God, he was good. Steve Carlton. Warren Spahn was on their list. We kind of drew the line a little later.
Yeah.
It's tough to leave a guy like that off. They're, the Fergie Jenkins of the world, it's like, oh God, look at this guy's career. It was painful, very painful. The guys, and even like you say, DeGrom, if we're going to look at like,
or Verlander too, right? Like, I mean, Verlander was somebody we would talk about. Yeah.
Yes.
Same with me. I struggled with Carlton, just the number of strikeouts he had. He had 4 Cy Youngs too, right? I think it.
Yeah, he was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like if you have Steve Carlton on your list, you're not wrong. You're just different. Totally fine. Warren Spahn, I struggled with, and I do view him a little differently than these guys. I penalized him for a couple of things. One is an extremely low strikeout rate. He would have been by far the lowest strikeout rate out of anybody on this list. I think he averaged 4.4 strikeouts per 9 or something like that. And to me, part of pitching, there is a domination part of it. He never struck out 200 batters in a season, and he pitched in a different environment. But he did lose 3 of his years to military service, and was without a doubt. Like, I'm not at all diminishing Warren Spahn. It's just I didn't even know how to weigh him in this, so that was probably why I didn't have him on my list.
Wow, he only had 2 seasons with an ERA plus better than 130.
Yeah,
in his whole career, and MLB Network had him number 3. You're going to tell me you're going to put him above Greg Maddux. You're going to put him above Pedro. You're going to put him above, and they did.
Yeah, I mean, maybe obviously you value somebody's. I mean, hats off to a guy leaving the very front end of his career,
right,
and being in the military and being, totally, you got to tip your cap to the guy. A lot of respect for him, but I do worry that you can't really, in today's environment, I just don't know how to categorize it, and I couldn't put him above people that are objectively, they just were, I thought, more deserving. I'm sorry.
Like I say, I'd like to hear the argument and see if it didn't just involve how many wins he had. Every year he'd win 21 or 22 or 23 games over and over again, and that's great. I mean, that's very valuable and all that stuff, but that doesn't put you at that spot on the list alone.
Yeah. So again, everybody, make sure to subscribe and also comment, because again, we're not saying we're right. You can definitely have a good argument. Actually, MLB Network would have a totally different list than we did. They have the big unit 1 and Seaver 2, which again, I love the Seaver attention. Great. And I'm not going to argue with that. So if somebody wants to say Seaver is the all-time greatest pitcher, that's fine too.
I'm blown away, legitimately, that we have the same 9.
It is really weird. Yeah. But then again, I look at where we drew the line, and I think we're probably right. We might have had a different 10.
Yeah. Might have had a different 10.
Yeah. I think Carlton probably would have been my 10th.
Carlton but also and Perry were fighting for 10 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also we have like guys like Roy Halladay, who had a great peak, who we didn't even mention, obviously great. Like Fergie Jenkins, Jim Palmer, Juan Marichal, also a legend, and Verlander.
There's no one really current. And I was looking at Verlander going, well, I could argue it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe it, but I could argue it. So
yeah, I'm comfortable with my list though. So anyway,
totally.
Yeah. I mean, thanks again, but be sure to comment and let's see your list.